إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has called for carrying out the necessary reforms at the Islamic Cooperation Organization. He also called for supporting the struggle of the Palestinian people for their legitimate right to establish their independent state. The Minister of Public Works and Basic Infrastructure has affirmed here in Algiers that Algeria, thanks to its economic assets, was ready more than ever before to strengthen its presence at both regional and continental levels. And at least 29 Palestinians have been killed and 110 others wounded in new bombardments carried out by the Israeli occupation against several parts of the Gaza Strip. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. A delegation of the National Assembly of the Republic of the Congo, led by its speaker, is on a 5-day official visit to Algeria. During his stay, the Speaker of the Congolese National Assembly will meet with the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, and the Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Salah Goudjil, in addition to a number of the state's senior officials. He also will pay a visit to a number of important facilities, institutions, and touristic sites. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has called from Gambia for reconsidering the governance of the Islamic Cooperation Organization and for carrying out the necessary reforms in accordance with the decision adopted at the initiative of Algeria. More details in this report by Majid Mila.
In a speech delivered on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Larbawi during the 15th Islamic Cooperation Organization Summit, the President stressed the importance of reforming the Islamic Cooperation Organization.
We aspire to achieve the noble goals and fight for just causes for which our organization was established. Fulfilling our goals requires the reconsideration of the governance of this organization, initiating the necessary reforms, and implementing the adopted resolutions initiated by Algeria to guarantee the organization's compliance with the multidimensional challenges and the confrontation of different dangers.
While President Tebboune said that what is happening in occupied Palestine does not only mark the collapse of the world order and international law, but also constitutes an attack against the legitimacy of international law and human rights as concepts and doctrine. The President said that the Israeli occupation is dealing a blow to all human values and is dehumanizing and depriving an entire people of their right to exist. The President called for international support and collaboration to support the struggle of the Palestinian people for their legitimate right to establish their independent state with Al-Quds as capital.
Algeria, which keeps voicing the concerns of the organization and its central cause at the UN Security Council, renews her call on the international community, free peoples, and peoples with conscience around the world to assume their responsibility and put an end to this human tragedy through an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire to end the aggression endured by the Palestinian people and to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. The international community should pool efforts to guarantee the immediate and urgent implementation of the decision of the UN Security Council, notably Resolution 2728. We should sue the occupation for its crimes and ensure the activation of all available international legal mechanisms to bring to justice the war criminals involved in the genocide and other illegal acts, in addition to the activation of a political process to reach a global, fair and lasting solution to the Palestinian issue, which guarantees the end of the occupation of Palestinian territories and grants the Palestinians the right to establish their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital.
وعاصمتها القدس الشريف.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has called in Banjul, Gambia, for the adoption of an extensive and coherent approach to ward off Islamophobia, which constantly targets and almost systematically Muslim communities and hamper attempts to undermine the foundation of the Muslim nation. In a speech he read on behalf of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, during the 15th summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Prime Minister, Nadir Larbawi, referred to a comprehensive approach to be adopted to face up the xenophobia.
We have to work on a comprehensive and coherent approach to counter Islamophobia, which constantly and almost systematically targets Muslim communities and thwart attempts to undermine the foundations of the Muslim nation under false pretexts, which sometimes take the freedom of opinion and expression as a misleading cover and justification. Our collective commitment to fighting extremism and terrorism and banning hate speech must be accompanied in turn by the fight against hate speech and extremism targeting the foundations of the Muslim nation so as to guarantee the promotion of the coexistence values and the culture of openness and tolerance enshrined in Resolution 130/72 of the United Nations General Assembly adopted in December 27 at the initiative of Algeria, thus devoting the date of May 16 of every year to celebrate the International Coexistence Day.
On the sideline of the 15th summit of the Islamic Cooperation Organization, Prime Minister Nadir Larbawi met with the Secretary General of the organization, Hussein Brahim Taha, with whom he examined the main issues on the summit's agenda and ways and means to boost the role of the organization in defending the causes of the Muslim nation, with the Palestinian cause on the top of the list. Meanwhile, in his capacity as representative of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, Mr. Larbawi met with Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, to whom he reiterated the congratulations of the President of the Republic for his election and his strong desire to strengthen cooperation relations between two countries. The Senegalese President, for his part, expressed his brotherly greetings and esteem to President Tebboune.
You are still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Minister of Public Works and Basic Infrastructure has affirmed here in Algiers that Algeria, thanks to its economic assets, was ready more than ever before to strengthen its presence at both regional and continental levels. Mohamed Khatel has more details in this report.
In his speech at the opening of the 10th edition of the African Investment and Trade Forum held here in Algiers, Mr. Rakhrouch said that the great experience acquired by Algeria in various economic fields enabled it to actively participate in the development of intra-African trade. He highlighted in this context the export of numerous non-hydrocarbon products to African countries through the opening of economic border crossings in order to achieve more gains in the context of intra-African trade. Meanwhile, Mr. Rakhrouch expressed Algeria's deep conviction that its development cannot be achieved without opening up to neighboring countries, particularly the countries of the south, adding that it is perfectly aware of the strategic character of regional infrastructure such as the Trans-Saharan Road with its Algiers-Lagos main axis, as well as the road linking Tindouf to Zouirat in Mauritania, to which Algeria attaches great importance as an extremely important access to West Africa, in addition to the Trans-Saharan Railway Line project completed in implementation of the commitments of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. According to Mr. Rakhrouch, the creation of these zones will make it possible to attract investments, stimulate and increase the volume of trade, as well as instill economic and development dynamics and create jobs, thus contributing to accelerating the development of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which came into force in recent years, calling on Africans to unify their vision in this era marked by the multiplication of regional economic blocs and to mobilize the necessary means to accelerate the economic integration of the continent.
The Algerian Economic Renewal Council has hailed the impact of the economic reforms undertaken by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, highlighted their contributions to the positive results of the national economy. The head of the Algerian Economic Renewal Council, Mr. Kamal Moula, highlighted the contribution of the reforms to the diversification of national economic activity, notably industrial activity, adding that the structuring projects which are due to be carried out over the next years in the process industries and the services sector will not only create hundreds of thousands of jobs, but will also protect our country from dependence, especially in strategic sectors. He also recalled that the 900 investment projects that were unlocked generating 22,000 direct jobs, considering that these projects are the best indication of the will to overcome bureaucratic obstacles. Mr. Moula stressed that the President of the Republic's speech was distinguished above all by the renewed interest now being paid to the development of the economy and of the social nature of the state. And 7 memoranda of understanding have been signed in the Mauritanian capital Nouakchott by Algerian economic operators and their Mauritanian counterparts, particularly in the field of cooperation, export and commercial representation in several sectors. A press release of the Ministry of Trade and Export Promotion indicated that the signing ceremony of the memoranda of understanding took place at the Algerian Society of Fairs and Exhibitions SAFEX in Nouakchott on the sidelines of the Algerian Products Fair now being held in the Mauritanian capital. The memoranda of understanding concern the areas of cooperation, exploitation and commercial representation in several sectors, including agri-food, ceramics, office furniture, pharmaceutical industry and building products, among others. Meanwhile, the ministry indicated that the fair, which continues for its third day, has recorded a large influx of Mauritanian economic operators with a view to concluding commercial contracts in different areas, in addition to holding of B2B meetings. The ministry recalled that the 6th edition of the Algerian Products Fair in Nouakchott take place until May 7th with the participation of 183 exhibitors from different Algerian economic sectors. And to the Middle East now, the UN Security Council will hold consultations behind closed doors in 2 days' time devoted to the mass graves found in the Gaza Strip following the Israeli troop withdrawal from some areas of the territory. The consultations to be held at the request of Algeria came a few weeks after the Palestinian Authority stated that over 400 bodies had been found in mass graves discovered inside the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. The UN Secretary General had expressed his deep concern and stressed the importance of setting up an independent international investigation to look into the exact circumstances of the killing of Palestinians. We're still with the Palestinian Authority issue, and at least 29 Palestinians have been killed and 110 others wounded in new bombardments carried out by the Israeli occupation against several areas of the Gaza Strip. The news agency Wafa said the bombardments hit the central regions of Al-Bureij, Deir al-Balah, and the refugee camp of Al-Maghazi in the central part of Gaza, as well as the southern town of Rafah. This brought to over 34,680 the number of people killed since the Israeli occupation launched its attacks on Gaza over 7 months ago. Meanwhile, UNESCO warned against the psychological consequences of the Israeli acts of aggression are having on children in the Gaza Strip. In a communique posted on X, stressed the necessity of reaching rapidly a ceasefire as the children of Gaza are suffering devastating levels of stress. In this connection, the head of the World Food Programme expressed major concerns at the humanitarian situation prevailing in Gaza, warning against an extension of famine to the southern part of the enclave. And meanwhile, in the West Bank, at least 25 Palestinians, including children, former prisoners, were arrested during operations carried out by the Israeli soldiers in the West Bank. The operation concerned the town of Nablus, Ramallah, Hebron, Jenin, Khalqiliya, occupied Jerusalem, and Tulkarem. In this respect, the governorate of Tulkarem called for an indefinite strike in protest at the killing of 5 youngsters during the Israeli Israeli operation carried out in the area. This came as protests are taking place in campuses across the United States to denounce the Israeli continued attacks on Gaza. The wave of protest has extended to other campuses in Europe and elsewhere, including Mexico, Canada, and Australia. In the meantime, negotiations today resumed in Cairo under the mediation of Qatar and Egypt to try and reach an agreement on a ceasefire in Gaza. And to Western Sahara now, addressing the national and international press at the end of the International Film Festival, the president of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Ibrahim Ghali, has reiterated the Sahrawis' determination to carry on the fight for independence.
We will continue the struggle until we fully defend our rights to freedom, defend our land and resources by using all the possible and legal means. Directly after November 13, we considered our air, water and Sahrawi region as war zone.
And the Sahrawi community in France has expressed its concern at the worsening of the situation of the Sahrawi workers in occupied territories, calling on the Security Council to ensure its protection and to free the Sahrawi political prisoners detained in Moroccan prisons and to allow the Sahrawi people to exercise the right to self-determination. Mariam Bershi has the details.
On the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the creation of the General Union of Workers of Sagia al-Hamra in Rio de Janeiro, the Sahrawi people in France shared their concern at the situation of the workers in the occupied territories are exposed, notably unemployment, marginalization, abuse, attempted murder, and all forms of human rights violations. They added that they were worried particularly about the situation of the Sahrawi workers in occupied Western Sahara following the resumption of the war since Morocco's violation of the ceasefire on November 13, 2020. The Sahrawis living in France said that on account of the war, Morocco has reinforced its military, police and media siege inside the Sahrawi territories. The Sahrawi community also called on the Security Council and the United Nations to allow the Sahrawi people to exercise their right to self-determination through a fair and free referendum.
You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and in Sudan, the World Food Programme has warned that time is running out to prevent famine in the southern province of Darfur following hostilities in Al-Fasher, which are hampering efforts to provide vital food aid to the region. The World Food Programme stressed civilians in Al-Fasher and Darfur province are already facing devastating levels of hunger as food aid deliveries were intermittent due to fighting and endless bureaucratic barriers. It stressed that the latest escalation of violence around Al-Fasher interrupted aid convoys coming from the Chadian border post. And in Brazil, devastating floods in the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul have killed around 60 people and have displaced 70,000 others. In addition to the 70,000 people displaced, more than 1 million of households are without water, and the scale of the destruction is still unknown. In total, more than 500,000 people are directly affected by the disaster, and at least 74 others are missing. The rainfall eased overnight, but is expected to continue for the next 24 to 36 hours, with the authorities now warning of landslides. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week, devoted this week to the demonstrations that are taking place in universities in the United States and Europe. Let's listen to the event of the week.
The international event of the week.
A wave of protests swept over this week's campuses in the United States to denounce Israel's continued acts of aggression on Gaza's population. Hundreds of students were arrested by the security forces who intervened to restore security and order following incidents with counter-demonstrators. For weeks, students protesting against Israel's attacks on Gaza have been rallying inside U.S. campuses, setting up encampments to press for a ceasefire in the devastated Palestinian territory. The university directors have assured that the protests, which have now extended to dozens of campuses, were peaceful. Asked about whether the student protest that comes ahead of the graduation ceremonies could turn into a nationwide student strike, our political analyst from California University, Hamid Salhi, had this.
There is a strong potential that the students' protest is likely to grow even bigger. Many of the students are exposed through real-time social media networks and have formed opinions in favor of ending the war in Gaza. They are extremely at humanitarian cause and see themselves as followers of previous anti-Vietnam War and anti-apartheid campuses movements. Most of them support an end of the war in Gaza. In March, a poll conducted by Harvard Institute of Politics found 51% of the youth interviewed supported the ceasefire versus 10 against it. In April, a different poll showed 32% of adults younger than 30 years old sympathized with the Palestinians and only 13% with the Israelis. Overall, only 18% of young voters approves of Biden's handling the war in Gaza, according to a third poll. So the expansion of this movement is likely to grow, especially as students finish with their final exams and enter into the summer break. The potential expansion into the summer has become a concern for the Democrat, whose national convention is expected to be held in August and in Chicago. A particular concern for the Democrat is that this is the same venue where the 1968 convention, which came during a year long of riots and mass unrest following the assassination of Martin Luther King in April of that year, and at the height of the anti-Vietnam movement. Such movement caused the Democrats to lose the elections, something that the current administration don't want to see happen, which lead us to suggest that because of the historical significance of the 1968 student movement, the chance that the students' demonstrations are more likely to grow than not. But it could also be the opportunity for the Democrats and Joe Biden to strike deals with the students to bring an end to the war in Gaza, to avoid a repeat of their defeat in 1968.
Reacting to the student unrest, US President Joe Biden urged the pro-Palestinian demonstrators to abide by the rule of law, while recalling that the US is neither an authorization nation nor a lawless country. He stressed that order must be prevailed in the civil society and defended the right to protest, as he rejected all attempts to cause chaos. Asked about the dilemma facing the American president over meeting the conservatives' demand for order and security and the students' request for a change in the US-Israeli relationship, our political analyst Hamid Salhi had the following.
President Joe Biden has a difficult task trying to win the support of students who represent a significant number of the Democrats in an election year and who see him as taking the wrong side with the Israeli Prime Minister and ignoring their demand to end the war in Gaza. In his attempt to appease both sides and create a balance that could keep their support, President Biden appeared to have failed the students by referring to them as a disorder, violent, and anti-Semitic intimidation on campuses and portraying their actions are outside their First Amendment of free speech. He went even further, stating the protest had not changed his mind. This double-talk strategic approach is also followed in Congress. 86 House Representative Democrats sent a letter days ago to President Biden alleging aid restrictions to Israel call into question that Israel is not complying with U.S. Foreign Policy Assistance Act, a provision which requires recipients of U.S. fund arms to uphold international law and allow free flows of U.S. humanitarian assistance. At the same time, the Democrat and the Senate joined forces with the Republican, considering to invite the Israeli Prime Minister to address Congress. Similarly, Democrats and Republicans in the House passed an anti-Semite law. It will have to pass the Senate before it becomes a law that takes a narrow definition to include such acts applies to only Jews feeling and those feeling intimidated. Feeling is the key word here, but what they consider anti-Semitic, and any reference that attacks or questions the existence of the Jewish Zionist states. Against this background, on the ground trail of electoral campaigning, Democrats are struggling finding support with the support of Israel. A Democrat campaigning for Joe Biden noted his frustration when he advocated for electrical vehicle and climate change and was asked, what about all the emissions caused by the bombing of Gaza? Clearly, this double-talk strategy has failed to win the support of the youth. President Biden must change course and be more responsive to the youth to avoid a potential defeat in the upcoming elections.
This week, pro-Palestinian protests took place in various university campuses across France. Similar protests were also staged in several campuses across Europe and elsewhere, including Italy, the United Kingdom, Canada and Australia. Although the number of students protesting, notably in the UK, remained smaller, the number of university campuses joining the protest continued to increase. The protesters are urging their universities to reconsider their ties with Israeli institutions and companies in response to the Israeli army's military operations in Gaza that claimed thousands of lives so far. Asked about whether the spread of the pro-Palestinian protest depicts the strong will of change voiced by the youth worldwide, our political analyst Hamid Salhi commented the issue.
Overall goal of this movement, which is referred to sometimes as an anti-war movement, others as solidarity with the Palestinians, is to put pressure on their national leaders or their government's policymakers and legislators to change their stance on Israel's genocide actions in Gaza and cut all ties with companies that do business with Israel and stop collaborating with Israeli universities. These students are inspired by the Palestinian struggle in Gaza, and more so, they want to be what they describe as to be in the right side of history. But there is more to it, and this is why the change are most likely to happen. The social media enabled these students to view their own experiences through the suffering of Gaza, triggering a strong sense of personal responsibility towards all forms of oppression. In the United States, through their support of Palestine, students are raising the issue of freedom of speech and why it does not apply to those who support Palestine. The same can be said about demanding universities to divest from companies that sells weapons to Israel, which transcends the belief of the students in wanting and demanding to end armed conflict, and so can be said about those who fight for identity right as African Americans, Native Americans, and other minorities, and also those who hold views against colonialism of all its forms. Simply put, as an educated class and future leaders and engaged citizen, the prospect of change is immense. It may take time, but these students have shown their desire and are inspired by their solidarity for Gaza, and the future is brighter for the world, and their impact on their political institution is more likely than not.
Let's recall that Turkey announced this week that Turkey said it put a halt to its trade relations with Israel on account of the worsening humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Turkey's decision came only a few days after Colombia's President Gustavo Petro announced that his country broke up its diplomatic ties with Israel for its actions in Gaza.